we have Phil Halton, the General Manager Strategy and Business Development with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. Peter Wells, Director of Safety and Compliance, New South Wales Roads and Maritime Services. Mr Richard Bell, Director of Regulatory Services for Vic Roads. And Neil Chambers, CEO of Victorian Transport Association. Just one thing that I forgot to mention right at the beginning, which is really just a prompt more than anything, and that is that we do have media here today. So that's not meant to constrain what people might say or how this workshop and how the sessions will roll out, but it's something that I do need to remind you of. So, as many of you would know, chain of responsibility is the logistics industry's key mechanism to ensure the safe and efficient movement of freight on our nation's roads. This means that everyone involved in the industry must continually evolve to ensure that this goal is met. For instance, it may mean that operators embrace some of the developing technology that's becoming available that assists the management of safety obligations. And it also means that sponsors of industry codes, such as the Australian Logistics Council, really do have to continue to develop advice and procedures as real-life experience suggests that evolution is required, so that freight participants can develop the procedures that deliver safe and efficient outcomes. And it also means that regulators, in turn, can assist this evolution by continually refining their guidance materials and enforcement guidelines as the Transport and Infrastructure Council of the Council of Australian Governments expects. This is so that industry participants, that being everyone in this room, can develop practices that not only deliver the safety and efficiency goals that the community expects of the industry, but also meets the requirements that governments require, as expressed by the laws passed by Parliament and enforced by these same regulators. And finally, it means that the chain of responsibility legislation itself, which, as you know, is embedded into the National Heavy Vehicle Law, or the Heavy Vehicle National Law, must also evolve so that it remains fit for the purpose. And so the National Transport Commission, and Paul Redder will be here later today to talk about some of these issues. There he is down the back of the room. Has also been asked in the short term to consider extending chain of responsibility provisions to cover issues such as maintenance and roadworthiness, as well as the circumstances where executive officers can be held liable for offences conducted by their businesses. So today's panellists have been specifically asked to come along to talk to you today because they all have a role in those issues that I've outlined. Phil Halton is the General Manager Strategy and Business Development with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, and with the National Transport Commission, the regulator is responsible for helping to develop the policies that refine the chain of responsibility. So moreover, as the regulation of heavy vehicles in Australia becomes slowly more nationally focused, and we do get that one common rule book that we're looking for, Phil and his team will be increasingly involved in establishing the standards expected of freight chain participants, as well as enforcement standards and priorities. So Richard Bell from Vic Roads and Peter Wells from Roads and Maritime Services, both of these gentlemen are responsible for the organisations that enforce the current rules. Their insight as to what is improved and what can be improved will be important to the industry. And finally, Neil Chambers, who is well known to many of you, is CEO of the Victorian Transport Association. Now Neil, as an industry veteran, does have a perspective of someone representing the operators who must play their role in ensuring that the safety and efficiency goals of the chain of responsibility laws are delivered to the Australian community. So to kick off the presentations this morning, I'd like to welcome to the mic Phil Halton.
few conversation starters, and I think our agenda is we're quite interested in being asked a few questions, and if you want to throw some curly ones, that would make us earn our money this morning. So I just want to step through a couple of propositions. I'm just looking on this keyboard. This is my mouse. Before we get into explicitly talking about safety, just a quick perspective. Why is there a national regulator? If you haven't seen this slide before, it's from my colleagues in the National Transport Commission many years ago. This is an economist's graph. This is the amount of freight that Western economies use to produce a single dollar of GDP, and you'll find Australia in the top left. We use in this country 3 times more freight, road freight, maritime freight, air freight, but particularly road freight, to produce a single dollar of wealth than is the average across the OECD. This is a freight-intensive economy, and it's all the lessons you learned in high school. You know, a nation that occupies an entire continent, a population of, what are we now, 23 million, I think it is, on an entire continent, and you guys know this better than I. If you still manufacture something in this country, odds are you manufacture it in one site only, and you distribute it nationwide from 1 or 2 facilities. People here would know about how BW and Woolworths run their business, and we all, I think, understand the dominant role the Port of Melbourne plays in terms of the input of goods to this country. So this is a freight-dependent economy. If Australia actually is going to have a future as an economic entity for the community, you've got to get freight right. Simple proposition. Simple proposition, and I can't use a mouse. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm having a little difficult. Excellent. Okay. So, if you work in the absolute heights of government, if you work in Treasury, Prime Minister's Department, that sort of thing, the key proposition about why you have a national regulator is making freight work in this country was recognised as far ago as 1990 as a major microeconomic reform issue. When Prime Minister Hawke created the National Transport Commission in 1990-1991, it was because there was an early recognition that eventually this country needs a single national marketplace, not for trucks, but ultimately for freight services. And although historically state governments, and I've proudly worked in a number of them over the years as well as in Canberra, although historically trucks have been thought of as a traffic management issue, when you get into freight, the companies in this room, you might procure services from transport operators who move thousands of units, all of which are local. Typical laden truck delivery in this country is about 73 kilometres in distance. But the customer is frequently a corporation which is national or regional or in 2 cities, and that is the agenda, to actually provide a uniform market for freight services. Even if the vehicle is local, the market ultimately is national. And in order to provide results, that means increasingly we're talking about working with corporations, whether it's a small business or a giant. We're talking about how to provide a uniform marketplace for corporations to create wealth. And on the safety angle, which I'm going to move to, a very simple proposition. The community has increasing expectations of safety outcomes of every industry, not least road transport. For the logistics sector to continue to deliver the productivity gains that our ministerial colleagues spoke about earlier, we need to retain the community's trust. And from time to time, that trust has been pretty severely tested. Safety is the first and foremost of those issues. Here in Melbourne, I don't need to tell anyone in this group about some of the other issues around amenity and community impacts, some of the challenges about making the Port of Melbourne work. Those aren't simply safety issues, they're community neighbourhood issues as well. But bottom line, if you're a corporation that moves freight, and unless you're a .com, that's just about everybody, freight and heavy vehicle safety has become a corporate social responsibility issue. That's a community expectation, but governments have delivered laws that make that a fact, quite apart from what the media might do to you. Role for the regulator, just briefly. And here we go again. Oh no, I've worked it out. In the first instance, in the first few years of our life, to be quite clear, we are most definitely in the strategic management space. We're in the steer, not row business. And when it comes to enforcement, we are quite interested in transparency, effectiveness. There's a major issue about consistency, which Michael alluded to before. We are the fund holder for the work done by transport inspectorates at state level. And you won't see all of this occur in public, but there's going to be increasing dialogues that we're having with our service providers about, is what you do effective? Is what you do well targeted at risk? How can we improve the system so it's more impactful? And as you'll see there, the transport inspectorates, they are our frontline service providers. We currently have only a few authorised officers who are direct employees of the regulator. And although I've got quite a history in enforcement, and to be candid, I'm not shy of it, something I want to move to is enforcement. While it's incredibly critical, let's be quite clear, it's a means to an end. It's a very effective means, and if you work in business, you need to be aware of it, because if it comes near you, it will change your business. But it is a means to an end. And from the regulator, something which we are quite interested in opening up as a dialogue is the actual objective of this law is not simply to enforce, it's to achieve compliance and particularly safety. And as you would know in your first business, the first best way to get a result from any person who works with you or for you is to manage them well. If you're having to have a disciplinary interview with your staff, you've already lost the plot. Same story for us. If we're having to send one of the enforcement providers into your business, it means we've already started to play catch up. Much better for all of us if we can be ahead of the curve, and we're very interested in how we can do that together in this country. The last time I was at the ALC, I was fascinated. I think it was Don Talbot, Michael, made open remarks about culture in a particular business where he has a leadership role. One of the first times in road transport where I've heard senior people talking openly in front of their peers about culture. Really, really promising development. Management systems, management tools, all of these kind of things are an issue I hope we can explore this morning. I've said this before in public. Chain of responsibility means if you are a customer at either end of the logistics chain, you now sit in the regulator's chair. You have exactly the same anxiety as myself, Peter, Richard. You need to be worrying about who can you trust and how do you know they are not letting you down. Because this law says if it goes wrong on the road, you can and will be asked questions about what you did to stop it and whether you did everything that was reasonable. So by all means have a good social relationship with your provider, but to use that old phrase from the Americans, trust and verify. And that's a topic we should explore today. This law gives the regulator some really interesting opportunities to do safety with industry instead of just to it. Michael's alluded to codes of practice. This is a power that was never available to me in the New South Wales RTA. It was not a feature of New South Wales law, so Peter has also not worked with it before. This regulator has a legal power to approve a code of practice and make it a recognised defence to prosecution. But the truly significant thing about that is the code of practice can actually then become quite authoritative guidance about what government is asking your business to do. At the moment, codes have only ever previously been approved in the state of Victoria. In 2 days' time, we're going to be renewing the ALC's code to keep it alive in Victoria because it had reached a legal sunset. But over the next year and a half, a discussion we really want to have in detail with the ALC and everyone in the room. What's the future of these codes? How are they going to work? How are they going to provide the right guidance, which is actually genuinely raising the bar, not providing a safe harbour? That's a discussion Australia needs to have. We've got work to do about improving NHVS, and I won't dwell on that, but there's particularly been questions asked about whether NHVS and its auditing system really tells government what it thinks it's being told, especially around maintenance. And we've got some very interesting powers around fatigue management. We've got, and this is something which is just worth highlighting, a sole legal power to approve fatigue management arrangements for heavy vehicle operators. Many of you in the room will have heard quite a bit about how our power to approve trucks accessing the roads has really significant separation of roles and responsibilities between councils, state road managers and ourselves. On safety, this regulator has the very high responsibility. We're the sole legal approver of fatigue management arrangements. We're the sole legal approver of electronic work diaries. We're the sole legal approver of accreditation. We're the sole legal approver of codes of practice. And it won't surprise you when I'm saying those things to say that's now a focus of some of our management planning. And as we move on from the events in February, we're really starting to dedicate some resources to adding value on those topics. And I think, Michael, that was what I wanted to do for a bit of scene setting. I'm not sure how you want to structure the flow, whether you want all of us to make some remarks and then we'll do a mosh pit.
I think we will. I should have probably have mentioned at the beginning that the whole purpose of these sessions is that we actually do get some discussion going, not only among the panel but also with the delegates as well. So what I'll be asking is that each of the panellists do make some comments. I'll probably then prompt the debate at the beginning. We'll get a bit of a discussion going, but I am expecting that the audience will play an important role in terms of getting across some of the information that this session is aimed at.
Okay, well, I'll say thank you and hand over, shall I?